said, okay, what animal, if you got rid of it, would save the most lives? It's got to be mosquitoes.
Releases of genetically modified mosquitoes and other insects into the environment. We wanted people to be aware that since more than 10 years ago, there have been open releases of these GM or genetically modified mosquitoes, and they have basically been a failure. The Oxitec, which is based in the UK but owned by an American company in Trexon, have been doing experimental releases of millions of GM mosquitoes, releasing large numbers of female GM mosquitoes inadvertently, which can bite and transmit disease. Other risks include not properly accounting for the fact that there are multiple species that transmit diseases. So if you only tackle one, you can create worse problems with another.
Bill Gates once said he is more afraid of a mosquito than a shark. While this does sound ridiculous on its face, given the fact that a shark could literally rip a human to shreds in a few seconds, mosquitoes are much more deadly statistically due to the diseases they can transmit. Actually, mosquitoes are considered to be the most deadly animal in the world, despite the fact that they're an insect, with roughly 1 million deaths attributed to mosquito bites every year, give or take. Now, a couple years ago, during the big Zika scare here in the US, a company called Oxitec wanted to release genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild in Florida. This was part of a campaign funded by Bill Gates to reduce the population of mosquitoes by essentially sterilizing the male mosquitoes so they could not reproduce with the female mosquitoes, thus crashing the population of mosquitoes, right? Now, the idea of population control is not new, as you can see. And in fact, it's a very popular idea in some circles, primarily amongst eugenicists. This is an ideology that Bill Gates has suggested, at the very least, be carried out on the human population through new vaccines, healthcare, and reproductive services.
The intention is to release only male mosquitoes because they don't bite, but in practice, with Oxitec's technology, the sorting process was actually very poor, and large numbers of GM female mosquitoes were released, which can bite and transmit disease, meaning that it's not a safe technology in that sense. There are also concerns about the survival of future generations of GM mosquitoes. They're supposed to die off, but in fact, that's also not perfect. There are multiple species which transmit these diseases. So if you do successfully suppress one species, another species can move in and actually potentially become more difficult to eradicate. Proper risk assessments were never really done, and certainly risk assessments that met European standards, which was the legal requirement for the export of these GM mosquitoes, were never published and consulted on.
Bill Gates has also been funding research into genetically modified mosquitoes to be able to deliver vaccines. Now, I'm not saying that this is what they are doing here, but at the same time, how do we really know, to be honest? Because where's the oversight? Well, the EPA already announced that they are rolling back the regulations due to the virus, so who is monitoring these experiments? And now, over the last few years, Gates has been openly funding population control campaigns, but in this case, mosquitoes are the target, and of course it's always to benefit mankind and eradicate mosquito transmissible diseases, right? Everybody hates mosquitoes, so yeah, okay, why not, right? Now, to make a long story short, the 2018 campaign was met with fierce resistance from locals in Florida because they didn't want or like the idea of genetically modified mosquitoes being let loose in their neighborhoods, and to be honest with you, I can't say that I blame them. Now, ultimately, the GM mosquitoes were released in some other countries in South America and a few other places, and later they were eventually even let loose in some areas of Florida. And now, despite all the public outrage, and now Oxitec, which has received over $7 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is at it again. And this time, they have received authorization from the EPA under an experimental use permit to release millions of genetically modified mosquitoes in Florida and Texas. Now, this seems like the perfect time to conduct an experiment on not only mosquitoes, but also the environment and the human population itself, due to the fact that the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, issued sweeping suspension of its enforcement of environmental laws back in March of this year, telling companies that they would not need to meet environmental standards during the outbreak. With these rolled back regulations, they have no expiration date on them, basically. They're open-ended and would allow any number of industries to essentially skirt environmental laws, with the agency saying that it will not, quote, seek penalties for not compliance with routine monitoring and reporting obligations. In other words, hey, you know, we're just going to go ahead and trust you guys to do the right thing, right? Don't worry about it.
I certainly think an experiment unleashed on humanity is not something we should mess with. When we know that bats eat mosquitoes and bats drop fruit, which lands on the ground, and pigs eat that and become very ill, and then people eat pigs. And it goes on from there with our water systems, our air supplies, and all of the things that we just shouldn't mess with, in my opinion.
Now, while many people may be unaware of this program due to, well, let's say you might be out of a job, or the economy is failing, the country's in flames, the media is nonstop promoting this fear of the virus, and now we have massive civil unrest all over this country, and it's spreading to other countries. So, if you haven't heard about this, I can't say I blame you. Now, there is a public forum on Oxitec's recent permit application, which garnered a little over 31,000 comments opposing the release of these genetically modified mosquitoes, and only 56 in support of it as of June 3rd, 2020. Now, the EPA is supposed to take into consideration all of these comments during the review process, but we'll see what happens, right? Because, hey, money talks.
And it horrifies me to let you know that he's cut a deal with the EPA to release 750 million of these bad boys in Florida over the next couple of years. And by the way, a suburb of Houston, Texas is also on the menu. It seems so unbelievable and so ridiculous that it can't be true. But again, it's something we've covered forever. And now that people are now waking up and what he's really about, people have to understand this goes beyond your food. This goes beyond your weather. This goes beyond education. This goes beyond your health. This is everything. This is the movement of an automation nation authoritarian on controlling a populace.
In addition, we don't even really know whether reducing the population is actually going to reduce the transmission of disease. So there were many uncertainties which were kind of brushed under the carpet. Well, Oxitec has actually stopped all its open releases of the technology which we talk about in the report, of these GM mosquitoes which are genetically programmed to die at the larval stage. But it has started some new experiments in Brazil with what it calls its second generation technology. It's just a new, untried, untested version. So we're really back to square one.
I guess we're just supposed to take these companies at their word, right? Because we can all trust corporations and biotech companies and Bill Gates, at their word. We can trust them, right? Because they have, I'm sure they have the environment and the public's best interests in mind, right? Now, again, I'm not saying that they are releasing these mosquitoes to vaccinate people right now, but as we can see here on the clinicaltrials.gov website, the U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command conducted a study on immunization via mosquito bite with radiation-attenuated sporozoites. I'm not sure how you say that, sporozoites, in collaboration with Seattle Children's Research Institute and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the site was updated as recently as last September, and this study included 54 different participants and even has a timeline of adverse reactions to the experiment. In other words, people who were involved in the experiment who had bad reactions to the mosquito-delivered vaccine, okay? Now, this research has been going on for years. As we can see here in a 2017 article, mosquitoes are the new syringe ? Seattle lab nibbles at malaria vaccine. Now, of course, we know that Bill Gates has been trying to eradicate malaria throughout Africa for a long time. He's been working on vaccines for a long time. They don't have one. And they're also working on engineering mosquitoes to be able to deliver vaccines, okay? This program was originally funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ended their support for this research after volunteers got infected with the very disease they were trying to prevent, okay? But the Department of Defense paid for the most recent trial, and the National Institute of Health funded the next one, and that is according to this 2017 report. So, who knows what's happened since then. This is just the very surface here of this rabbit hole. Now, Bill Gates and the U.S. government are not the only ones exploring this next generation of vaccine delivery using mosquitoes. Japanese scientists are also getting in on the fun, if you want to call it that, as they hope to turn mosquitoes into flying vaccinators. So, how do you get around the vaccine hesitant or the anti-vaxxers, right? Bill Gates has openly stated time and time again he wants to vaccinate nearly everyone on the planet. We know that there has been much resistance to this. Myself, personally, I don't consider myself to be anti-vax, but you know what? My immune system's working just fine, and I don't need any shots, to boost my immune system. And, we've seen the clips where Bill Gates admits that injections into the bloodstream, directly into the bloodstream, go around your immune system, right? It doesn't necessarily help your immune system. So there's a lot of questions into this. I'm no expert. I'm no virologist or vaccine expert. So, but at the same time, they are working on developing and engineering mosquitoes to be able to indiscriminately vaccinate and inoculate the general public.
Your body isn't well defended against foreign things being stuck directly into your blood. It's a very efficient way around the human immune system.
Now, many would consider this to be conspiracy theory, despite the fact that Gates has the means and the motive and has already spent millions of dollars developing genetically modified mosquitoes to deliver vaccines.
But there are some very important lessons from this report. The risks of releasing genetically modified organisms, and also about misleading claims of benefits. So we're questioning really whether all the necessary standards and processes are in place to deal with this new proposed release. This is an international issue, and it will become more of an international issue if target malaria moves to the future generation of GM mosquitoes, which use something called gene drive, which are intended to replicate and spread in the environment. Eggs can be transported all around the world, so releases don't just affect one country, they can potentially affect others. It's clearly very important that members of the public give their fully informed consent to releases of any genetically modified organism into the environment, especially where it's intended to have an effect on their health. And you need to have people fully engaged on the grounds, and that you have a process that's not just being run by the company or organization which wants to promote the releases.
Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
You what, mate?